The Black Atlantic, Modernity and Double Consciousness by Paul Gilroy is a seminal work in cultural studies that redefines the understanding of race, modernity, and cultural identity. Published in 1993, the book explores the cultural, historical, and intellectual dynamics of the African diaspora, specifically focusing on how the transatlantic slave trade and its aftermath have shaped modernity. Central to Gilroy's thesis is the idea of the Black Atlantic, a term he uses to describe a cultural and political space where African American, Caribbean, and European influences converge and interact. Key themes and concepts. 1. The Black Atlantic as a counterculture of modernity. Gilroy challenges Eurocentric narratives of modernity, which often ignore the impact of colonialism and slavery. He argues that the Black Atlantic represents a counterculture to modernity, where the experiences of African-descended peoples offer an alternative lens through which to view the development of the modern world. This counterculture is not merely reactive, but contributes to the broader intellectual, cultural, and political frameworks of modern society. The transatlantic slave trade, according to Gilroy, was not only an economic phenomenon, but also a cultural one. The forced migration of millions of Africans created a dynamic and hybrid cultural space that defies national boundaries. This interconnectedness challenges the rigid notions of national identity and cultural purity that underpin much of Western modernity. Double consciousness and diaspora. Drawing on W.E.B. Du Bois's concept of double consciousness, Gilroy examines the psychological and cultural duality experienced by people of African descent. Double consciousness refers to the internal conflict of seeing oneself through the lens of one's own identity and through the distorted perceptions imposed by a dominant, often racist society. For Gilroy, this duality is central to understanding the diasporic experience. The Black Atlantic is not just a geographic space, but a psychological and cultural one, where identities are continually negotiated. This negotiation results in a hybrid identity that challenges traditional notions of belonging and exclusion. 3. Critique of nationalism. Gilroy critiques the tendency of both Western and post-colonial societies to view culture and identity through the lens of nationalism. He argues that this perspective is inadequate for understanding the complexities of the African diaspora. Instead of being rooted in a single nation or culture, the identities of diasporic peoples are transnational and fluid. This transnationalism is evident in the cultural productions of the Black Atlantic, such as music, literature, and political thought. For example, Gilroy discusses the influence of African American music, such as jazz and blues, on global culture. These forms of expression, born out of the diasporic experience, transcend national boundaries and create a shared cultural space inherently transnational. Number 4. Cultural hybridity. One of the most compelling aspects of the Black Atlantic is its emphasis on cultural hybridity. Gilroy highlights how the diasporic experience has produced unique cultural forms that blend African, European, and American influences. This hybridity is not a dilution of culture, but a source of creativity and innovation. Gilroy uses examples from music, literature, and philosophy to illustrate this point. The works of writers like Richard Wright, Frantz Fanon, and C.L.R. James, as well as the music of figures like Bob Marley and the blues artists of the early 20th century, exemplify the creative potential of cultural hybridity. These cultural products are not bound by national or ethnic identities, but reflect the fluid and dynamic nature of the Black Atlantic. The politics of memory. Memory plays a crucial role in the construction of diasporic identities. Gilroy examines how the history of slavery and colonialism is remembered and represented in the cultural practices of the African diaspora. This memory is not static, but is continually reinterpreted and reimagined through art, music, and literature. The act of remembering serves both as a means of resistance and as a way to construct a collective identity. By recalling the horrors of slavery and the resilience of those who endured it, diasporic communities assert their place in history and challenge the erasure of their contributions to modernity. 6. The ship as a symbol. One of the most iconic images in the Black Atlantic is the ship, which Gilroy uses as a metaphor for the diasporic experience. The ship represents the movement of people, ideas, and cultures across the Atlantic. It is a site of both suffering and resistance, where enslaved Africans forged new cultural identities despite the dehumanizing conditions of the Middle Passage. The ship also symbolizes the interconnectedness of the Black Atlantic. It is a space where boundaries between nations and cultures blur, and where new forms of identity and resistance emerge. The ship, in Gilroy's analysis, becomes a powerful symbol of the hybrid and transnational nature of diasporic culture. Intellectual influences and intersections. Gilroy's work is deeply informed by a range of intellectual traditions, including Marxism, post-colonial theory, and critical race studies. He engages with thinkers like W.E.B. Du Bois, Frantz Fanon, and C.L.R. James, as well as European philosophers like Hegel and Marx. This interdisciplinary approach allows him to bridge the gap between different academic traditions and to offer a nuanced analysis of the African diaspora. 1. Frantz Fanon and colonial alienation. Gilroy builds on Fanon's exploration of the psychological effects of colonialism. Like Fanon, he examines how the experience of racial oppression shapes identity and culture. However, Gilroy extends Fanon's analysis by focusing on the transnational and diasporic dimensions of these processes. 2. C.L.R. James and the role of culture. C.L.R. James's emphasis on the cultural and political contributions of the African diaspora is another key influence on Gilroy. James's work on the Haitian Revolution and his analysis of modernist literature provide a foundation for Gilroy's exploration of the Black Atlantic as a space of cultural production and resistance. 3. Post-colonial theory. Gilroy's critique of nationalism and his emphasis on hybridity align him with post-colonial theorists like Homi Bhabha and Edward Said. However, he distinguishes himself by focusing specifically on the Atlantic as a site of cultural exchange and by foregrounding the experiences of the African diaspora. The legacy and impact of the Black Atlantic. Since its publication, the Black Atlantic has had a profound impact on the fields of cultural studies, history, and sociology. It has reshaped the way scholars understand the African diaspora and its contributions to modernity. By challenging Eurocentric narratives and emphasizing the transnational and hybrid nature of diasporic cultures, Gilroy has opened up new avenues for research and debate. 1. Influence on cultural studies. Gilroy's work has been instrumental in expanding the scope of cultural studies to include the experiences and contributions of marginalized groups. His emphasis on hybridity and transnationalism has influenced a wide range of disciplines, from literature and music studies to anthropology and political science. 2. Rethinking modernity. By framing the Black Atlantic as a counterculture of modernity, Gilroy has challenged traditional understandings of modernity itself. His work has prompted scholars to reconsider the role of colonialism and slavery in shaping modern society, and to recognize the contributions of African-descended peoples to modern intellectual and cultural life. 3. Contemporary relevance. The themes of the Black Atlantic remain highly relevant in the contemporary world. Issues of migration, identity, and cultural exchange continue to shape global politics and culture. Gilroy's insights into the hybrid and transnational nature of identity offer valuable perspectives for understanding these ongoing processes.